This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
I'm Roby Brock. Welcome to Talk Business and Politics Daily. It is Wednesday, August 31st. Let's check out today's top stories. Governor Asa Hutchinson and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration signed a memorandum of understanding that will allow more federal research dollars to flow into Arkansas, in particular at the National Center for Toxicological Research at the Pine Bluff Arsenal. Hutchinson said the new agreement with the federal regulatory agency is a renewal of a previous 5-year memorandum of understanding. Solar cell startup Pika Solar has again gained Sunshot Initiative money, this time $2 million to increase the efficiency in solar cell technology. The $2 million could ultimately lead to new high-tech manufacturing jobs in northwest Arkansas. And Millie Ward has done enough to be a leader and influencer in Arkansas's business world during her career, but she continues to push and has in recent years expanded her efforts to improve the state's startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Ward, who is the co-founder of advertising giant Stoneward, recently visited with Talk Business and Politics to discuss her thoughts about startups and entrepreneurship and how they intersect with her business legacy. And those are your top stories of the day. You can check out a full read on those articles and much more at our website, talkbusiness.net. Still to come, Dr. Marta Lloyd and Janet Harris with the Winthrop Rockefeller Institute. They've been in Cuba in search of building bridges with Arkansas. We'll also go inside the numbers for a look at the national economy. And political prognosticator Charlie Cook was in town on Monday. What did he have to say, and what was the response to his predictions? Details after this.
First Security is here, only here. So that means we're here, here, and here. Even here. And definitely here. Because here is where we want to be for you. First Security Bank, only in Arkansas.
Arkansas's most abundant natural resource provides the core asset for Deltic Timber Corporation. In addition to the sustainable yield stewardship of its well-stocked timberlands, Deltic adds value by integrating its efficient wood products manufacturing facilities, as well as through planned development of commercial and residential real estate. Deltic Timber Corporation, creating value for a growing Arkansas.
Earlier this summer, my next two guests went to the communist island of Cuba to learn more about our neighbors to the south and how Arkansas may eventually benefit from a more open policy of engagement, a prime objective for the Obama administration and several of Arkansas's federal lawmakers. Joining me now is Dr. Marta Lloyd. She's the executive director of the Winthrop Rockefeller Institute, and Janet Harris, director of programs. Did I get those right?
Yes.
I didn't mix and match or anything. No. See, I get an A+ for introductions there. So you guys went to Cuba, didn't even tell me. I find out after the fact that you guys went to Cuba. So tell me, what did you expect, Marta, and what did you experience?
To be honest, Roby, I don't think I knew what to expect beyond just what you've seen in pictures and, of course, what you've read and what you've heard. But immediately what we saw when we got to Cuba was a country frozen in time. Very literally frozen in time. You think that you hear about the old cars and so forth,
right.
But that is all there is. So, and I think probably the thing that I wasn't prepared for was the genuine goodness of the people, their sense of community, their hope for a bright future. I think is one of the things that stuck with me, and I was struck most.
Was it a life-changing experience, do you think? Would you put it in that category?
Absolutely, for me it was.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about what you expected and what you experienced.
Like Marta, I didn't know what to expect, really. And it's hard to know going into Cuba because there are still a lot of restrictions on travel, both for Americans and in interacting with the Cuban officials. So I didn't know what to expect, but getting there, you immediately recognize those things that she mentioned, that this is a place that is economically experiencing stagnation and has for the last 60 years, really since the embargo. And I think the thing that was most interesting to me was just that there are all these contradictions in Cuba. You know, we think about the embargo having been in place all these years. We haven't interacted with the Cuban people. We haven't traded with them. And so we think of them as a very oppressed country. And in many ways they are, but they're also positioned to leapfrog in ways that will benefit them, I think, in energy and agriculture.
Well, I want to talk about that because one of the things that was interesting in a write-up that you guys did afterwards was about the innovation that you saw there. It was innovation built out of necessity, really. If you don't have anything new, you have to find a way to keep your cars working. You have to find a way to innovate in energy. You have to find a way to innovate in your crops and how you do that. Maybe speak to me a little bit about what you saw there that impressed you in that respect.
You want me to speak about the cooperative farms? So I had an opportunity to go out with Secretary of Agriculture Wes Ward and also Dr. Kurt Rahm, who is the head of international programs at the University of Arkansas, and we went out to a cooperative farm. And so this is a new opportunity for Cubans, relatively new, I think in the past probably 6 or 8 years, that they've had an opportunity to actually take like up to 100 acres of land and farm it cooperatively, so that might mean 150 people, families coming together to farm. So innovation in terms of you know, how they try to produce crops off of that land but as you know, Janet talks about leapfrogging, and the thing that stands out is they're positioned to leapfrog because they understand organic gardening, organic
Which is
farming.
really just kind of coming into its own here.
Exactly,
in
but they
Arkansas
have,
and
you know,
US.
they are very far along with that, and they're very proud of it. But there are barriers to their leapfrogging because they don't have modern equipment. They don't have high yield seeds, so there's a limit to what they can actually produce.
Not a bunch of export opportunities for them either. What about on the energy sector, Janet? How did you see innovation there?
Very interesting. So the Cubans burn crude oil right now. That's their primary source of energy and has been for a number of years. I think they recognize, first of all, that's a dirty and inefficient way to create energy, and it's also very dangerous for them because it's made them dependent on their oil trading partners. So, you know, for years it was the Soviet Union, now it's Venezuela, and they recognize that they need to move away from that. But they've never grown to be dependent on other fossil fuels, and so they recognize that this is a chance for us to really invest in renewables. And they're looking at wind, they're looking at solar, and also biomass, and they have a lot of sugarcane on the island. And so they're encouraging and opening up the country for foreign investment in alternative sources of energy. And it positions them to be a cleaner energy producer much more quickly than they might have otherwise been if they hadn't had those challenges.
Yeah. So tell me, Marta, what does the Institute do now that you have had this experience and you are, I mean, you had this eye-opening opportunity to see all of these things in the mix. What are you going to try to bring back to the mountain? What are you going to try to bring back to Arkansas to say, let's keep this dialogue going? What can you do? What can you facilitate?
Well, that's a great question. And as you know, Roby, the mission of the Institute is to bring people together, thinkers, scholars, community leaders, state leaders, to address issues that are important to the state and engage in thoughtful discourse. So we are in the process of exploring different opportunities, whether they're in research, energy, agriculture, and whatever makes sense in terms of the next conference. You know, we have several ideas.
Right.
One of the things that we've thought of, and actually I'll ask Janet to address this, is actually bringing together people who have been there in Arkansas and begin to think about what's next for our state.
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities, as you know, to trade, particularly for a state like Arkansas where we produce a lot of rice and Cubans import a lot of rice. So there are things like that that we've discussed before. We had a Cuba Consortium meeting on the mountain earlier this year. But what I think we want to do is just continue the dialogue about all the things that we have to learn from the Cuban people. And we can benefit, honestly, from some of their research and their advances in medicine and in agriculture and some of these other areas. So just to keep that dialogue going and to get people engaged in this question about, it's not just about lifting the embargo. That is one policy issue that we struggle with. but it's much more complicated than that. And getting to know the Cubans is, I think, a big positive first step. And so
we'll bring a couple of them to the mountain. They'd like it up there on Petty
Absolutely.
Jean.
I think
so, too.
And if you need a moderator, let me know. I probably could find a weekend to be free for something like that.
We'll keep that in mind.
All right, Janet Harris, Dr. Marta Lloyd with the Winthrop Rockefeller Institute. Thank y'all very much. Appreciate it. When we come back from this word from our sponsors, we'll dive into our next round of Inside the Numbers, plus reaction to national political analyst Charlie Cook's Arkansas presentation. We're back after this.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.
I did.
As Arkansas's population grows, so do our energy demands. But with the right mix of resources, reliable, affordable power will always be a reality. These resources are all around us in our rivers, blowing through our trees, even right below our feet. The answer isn't focusing on one resource, it's embracing them all. The electric cooperatives of Arkansas know that a balanced approach to power builds our communities and powers our dreams. Visit themixmatters.com and see why there's power in knowledge.
Numbers, numbers, numbers. We're going to play with percentages today as we go inside the numbers for a closer look at the national economy. 1.1%, that was the real gross domestic product annual rate in the second quarter of 2016. The number is the second estimate of GDP for the quarter. There's going to be one more revision in the next few weeks as more data pours in. Now, this 1.1% figure is considered pretty anemic, and it certainly disappointed economists. Lower second quarter corporate profits were the primary reason cited for the poor performance. Negative 2.6%, negative 2.1% when we look at trucking and freight, two pretty good barometers of future economic performance. We see some negative news. July shipments of freight goods down 2.6% according to the Cass Index, which evaluates data from 350 of the largest shippers in the U.S. The American Trucking Association's truck tonnage index fell 2.1%. Still, year-to-date, compared with the same period in 2015, tonnage is up 3.2%. There are some signals that there will be an uneven pace to the rest of the year. And finally, 25%. That's the projected growth rate for commercial drone adoption over the next 5 years. As companies explore how to use drones for deliveries in warehouses and even to your front door, a report published by TechSci Research suggests an average 5% per year growth in companies using drones for a multitude of purposes between now and the year 2021. You can find stories like these with much more detail and analysis on our website each and every day at talkbusiness.net. After the break, national political analyst Charlie Cook was in town this week for a luncheon that we helped sponsor. What's his latest forecast for president and control of the House and Senate? Find out after this.
Circuits turn on the lights by making a connection, by closing the loop. At Entergy, we believe our economy is circular too. What you put in comes back. So we invest billions in new infrastructure, which helps attract new industry, which helps create new jobs. We partner with local communities to electrify the economy, and together we power life. Entergy.
You've likely heard of the Great Arkansas Treasure Hunt. In fact, you or your business may have property to claim in the hunt. But where does this treasure come from? Businesses like yours. The law calls it unclaimed property. If your business is holding money on its books that you've not been able to return to the owner, it's most likely unclaimed property, and the law requires it to be sent to the state auditor's office each year. Auditor Andrea Lee's office can make the process for businesses to comply with the law easy and straightforward. Help us help you return Arkansans' unclaimed property at auditor.ar.gov.
Charlie Cook is one of the nation's leading authorities on U.S. elections and American political trends. He was in Little Rock this week for a luncheon sponsored by Talk Business and Politics and the Arkansas Economic Developers. Well, what did he have to say about this year's elections, and what was the crowd's response? Talk Business and Politics' Steve Bronner explains.
Earlier this week, Charlie Cook, who is the author of the Cook Political Report, spoke to an Arkansas Economic Developers Luncheon in Little Rock, sponsored by Talk Business and Politics. And he talked about the presidential race, and he expects Hillary Clinton to be elected president of the United States. He thinks that the Republicans just have too many problems with the Electoral College. 18 states have voted Democrat in the last 6 elections. That's 242 Electoral College votes, only 28 short of what they need for victory. Also, the Republicans just have too many problems with non-white voters, and especially Donald Trump has those problems. He doesn't expect to be he expects her to win by about 3 to 5% and no more, because she just has too many negatives. So it'll be that close. The Senate, a lot of analysts think that it will be a fairly big win for Democrats. He thinks it's going to be 50-50, which would still put it in Democratic control because the vice president is the tie-breaking vote. But it'll be about 50-50 because he thinks that Republican Senate candidates across the country will soon begin to distance themselves from Trump and say that and paint themselves as the alternative that voters have to vote for them to keep from giving Hillary Clinton a blank check. Finally, the House of Representatives, he thinks, will stay in the control of the Republicans.
And you can read our coverage of Charlie Cook's political speech from earlier this week on our website at talkbusiness.net. Steve Bronner has full-blown coverage of the event. Be sure to check it out. That's all for today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you tomorrow.